plot that doesn't belong to them.
Very well.
At some point there might be, but I doubt it will be.
Although no person is asking for probation, the defendant is statutorily ineligible for probation, pursuant to the dictates penal section 190 and 190.2, and consequently probation is denied. As counsel has pointed out, I do have discretion under penal section 654 as to which count to impose sentence. Listening to the evidence in this matter, I do find that the defendant was the mastermind in this conspiracy to commit murder. Baker did not have the intelligence to plan such a brutal, well-thought-out slaughter. The defendant was the prime mover in this execution of a human being, and consequently, I am utilizing my discretion to impose the more serious of the sentences. Although this is not before me, Penal Section 1385.1 states that a court does not have discretion to strike a special circumstance that is found true by the jury. The legislature has, in its wisdom, had such bills before it that would take away this lack of discretion. For purposes of any future legislature, I must state now that if I had the discretion to strike a special circumstance, in this particular case, I would not. For the crime which defense been convicted in count 1, violation of section 187, subsection A, murder in the first degree, with special circumstances having been found true, pursuant to section 190.2, subsection A, subsection 1, and 190.2, subsection A, subsection 15, we sentence the court as follows. Probation is denied for the reasons I have stated. Defendant is sentenced to state prison for the term prescribed by law, which is life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. As to count 2, violation of section 182, subsection A, subsection 1, conspiracy to commit murder. Defendant is sentenced to state prison for the term prescribed by law, which in that case is 25 years to life. The sentence in count 2 is stayed pursuant to penal section 654. Said stay to become permanent upon the successful completion of the sentence in count 1. Then is levied a $10,000 restitution fine pursuant to penal section 1202.4, subsection B. An $80 security fee, which is $40 per count. A $60 criminal court assessment, which is $30 per count. She is to submit a tissue sample for a DNA databank pursuant to penal section 296. She is given the following credits of 2,932 actual days, 0 days conduct credits, pursuant to penal section 2933.2. This time, ma'am, I have to advise you that you have the right to appeal to the Court of Appeal from the judgment of this court. You have, if you wish to appeal, you have 60 days to file your notice of appeal. It must be filed in this court and not in the Court of Appeal. It must state that you are appealing, what it is you're appealing from. It must be signed by you or your attorney. If you appeal, you have a right at no cost to you to a transcript of the trial court proceedings as provided by the California Rules of Court. If you appeal and you do not have the money to hire an attorney, one will be appointed for you free of charge by the appellate court. You understand your appellate rights, ma'am? Very well. We are done.
Your Honor, can I ask one additional thing? The court has any discretion for asking that the court recommend that she be housed in CIW, which is a closer state prison facility for the benefit of her children who obviously want to continue seeing her.
I cannot tell the Department of Corrections Rehabilitation where to place their inmates.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. Thank you. I'm good. I know everything from the trial. I figured.
This is a defendant who is extremely deserving of the sentence of life without parole. I know from past history in our office, perhaps had there been a different administration, I remember a case regarding the Green Widow who did something similar to this, and she received the death penalty. This is one of the most premeditated, calculated, devious murder conspiracies I've prosecuted during my 31 years at the District Attorney's Office. And as this court knows, I have handled numerous cases involving serial killers. This is a defendant who, but for her actions and her decisions, her husband, Fabio Sementilli, who gets lost in all of this circus that goes on every time we have one of these cases, he would still be alive today. This was a completely senseless murder driven solely by this defendant's greed and her lust, which we saw on full display during the trial that took place over the course of several months this year, based on her desire to get rid of her husband because he no longer served her purposes, and she needed to have a way to fund her life together with Robert Baker, who she chose over her husband, and whether her kids want to believe it or not, over her children, because they never ever even came up in any of the conversations that she had with so many people who testified in this matter. It's incredibly despicable as far as motives go, because again, without her and her plotting and her planning the murder of her husband, he would be alive today. But then you add to it the lengths this defendant went to in order to conceal and destroy evidence, and how time and time again she got others to do her dirty work for her, including her lover, so that he could get the murder done and she could take a step back and pretend to still be this loving wife, which we all know was a complete act. And once and again, it showed through the admissions that she was caught making in the jail lockup, through the letters about getting rid of her husband and wanting to marry Robert Baker, through the entire complex setup of this time frame for that day, shows a level of sophistication and planning that I rarely see in these kinds of questions, these kinds of cases. There is no question but that this defendant was the mastermind behind the murder of Fabio Sementilli. One only had to listen to Robert Baker's testimony for about 10 minutes before you got the clear picture of who was the mastermind between the two. Mr. Baker isn't smart enough to even follow up his lies with consistency. There was nothing that was credible about his testimony, and the jury so found. In addition to that, we had the testimony from Christopher Austin, and while he was kept out of the center of the conspiracy between the defendant and her lover, Robert Baker, he knew enough that this was being done at her behest. And as I've said from the beginning of the trial, this case was about the ultimate betrayal. This was one that I'm sure Fabio Sementilli never could have imagined in his wildest nightmares was coming. That his wife was literally plotting his murder with her lover. It's an absolute betrayal, not only of Fabio Sementilli, the victim in this case, but of her children, who have been brainwashed by her lies and her deception. And that's their choice. They're adults now. If they choose not to face the truth, that's on them. But we're here to do a job. We've done our job. The jury did their job. And we're here to hold the defendant, the main player, the heavy in this case, responsible for her actions. She used her family, her children, her parents, her sister, to do her dirty work for her, to lie to their father in order to cover up this scandalous affair that she had been having for at least a year, and God knows what else she used them for. She manipulated everybody, all of her friends, all of her family, anybody who came into contact with her for the most minor of things, such as buying a vehicle. We heard about that.